Hello, I'm author Nancy Flinchbaugh, and I want to invite you to our Writing for Change podcast. On this program, I interview people who are, like me, writing for peace, justice, and the earth close to the heart of God. And today I'm happy to welcome Reverend Dr. Ken Whitt, the author of God is Just Love. The Reverend Dr. Ken Whitt is a good friend of mine. He's a writer, he's a retired American Baptist pastor, and I was fortunate to have him as my pastor for 10 years at First Baptist Church, Springfield, Ohio. And he continues to pastor a small church in retirement. He's also the executive director of Traces of God, a spiritual formation ministry, and he's the father of three wonderful children and also the grandfather to 14 amazing children with whom he deeply and lovingly engages. Well, welcome, Ken, Reverend Dr. Ken Whitt. It's good to see you again. Ken was my pastor at First Baptist Church Springfield for 10 years, and we did a lot of growing and learning together. And
Yeah, that's for sure.
one thing I really liked about you and your ministry is that you had a very deep sense of spirituality, but that also took you out into the world to be involved in social justice issues too. And in my own life, I just found that so important. And as we've grown, each of us, I know the earth has become more and more important to us in our spirituality and the way we practice our spirituality. So I'm looking forward to this interview today because I think you, like me, are writing for change and you're doing some other things too to bring good change to our world as a Christian, as a pastor. So first start by telling me a little bit about yourself and how you became a writer.
Well, I sent you some information that you put on a slide, and did you want to put those up at the beginning
I'll
or
share that
not?
with people later. Yeah,
Okay, great.
you can
Okay,
share.
now I understand. Well, as Nancy said, am both a pastor and a spiritual director, retreat leader, all of that. In my retirement, I lead a spiritual formation ministry called Traces of God. And I didn't intend to, but I found a call out to a little church in the hills of southeastern Ohio called Carbon Hill Christian Church. It's Disciples of Christ, but they're so much like American Baptists that I feel incredibly comfortable in that setting. Um, One of the most important things about me for the purpose of this interview and why we're talking about why the world needs so much change and people who write and work towards change is that I'm a grandfather of 14 children from ages about 29 to just turned one. And I focus a lot of my life on making a difference in their lives. For example, once a month, one of the children spends a day with us overnight, and we focus on them learning a skill that teaches them that they can get by as things change in the world, that they can learn to do projects like cutting firewood by hand, building with hand tools, baking bread, cooking on an outside fire, many different kinds of skills that we work on depending on what they're interested on their various days. Um, Chase is one of the younger children. He's 7 now, and he loves to learn about foraging. So he's actually helped me make acorn bread. He loves to scatter all over the property and pick up hundreds of acorns, and he's totally motivated. So we go with where their hearts already are and teach them to live in a world that's made by hand and have skills that don't depend on the systems that we usually have around us, but are kind of vulnerable, like electricity or other things.
Yeah, so started writing for change, and I know you've written 2 books now. And do you want to just tell us a little bit about what kind of change you're hoping for in your writing?
Well, let me go at this from a somewhat different point of view that came
Okay.
up to me during my quiet time this morning. If someone were to ask me why would I read your book, what is a most important facet of what you've written in everything you do, I would have to say that in the closing chapters of my second book, God is Just Love, and throughout the first book, um, I help people learn how to discern how they can be change agents in the world, how they can follow a path, how to discern, how to walk close enough to the Spirit that the Spirit can provide guidance when there's tough choices ahead. So obviously the theme God is just love is a fundamental part of that, because when you really know that, because of your spiritual journey, when you really know that God is just love, then you know that there will always be a way forward, that no matter what the obstacles you confront or what the changes that happen in the world, you will be able to turn to the Spirit and find the healing and the confidence and the specific guidance. So both books teach those skills fundamentally. Um, so that's kind of where I would start. And in God is Just Love, I also walk people step by step through all kinds of insights and activities that will help them and the people they love, like other grandparents nurturing the lives of their grandchildren. Very practical steps, like the book ends with 100 uh, different suggestions about how you can help change the course of our natural world, how you can help heal the creation. There's a lot more than 100, by the way. People just kept sending in ideas. So that's pretty much a starting point for the answer to your question.
And I also remember reading the book is that it was an enlightening experience for you and a lot of the reading that you were doing as you started to understand the science and the
Yeah.
creation of all life and
Well, Nancy,
finding,
are writers guided by the Spirit in order to help others or to help themselves? Well, obviously, the answer is both. I learned so much in this uh, process of learning everything I could about spirituality and science, and then being led directly to speak about the science of climate change and the kind of overshoot that's happening on the planet right now, that um, uh, tells us that there's deep changes ahead, and we don't know exactly when and what they will be, but it is possible to prepare. I mean, all of us do it to some degree. There's a carbon monoxide detector and fire alarm smoke detector up there in the ceiling right near me, and we have fire extinguish out by the campfire. And my children's committee here at Hideaway Hills is selling fire safety equipment, and we had a workshop last weekend, and everybody does some kind of preparation. If you lived in Kansas in the previous century, where you were in Tornado Alley, you built a root cellar, a tornado shelter. Everybody did. I mean, it was just common sense. Uh, what does common sense tell us we ought to be preparing for now? Yeah, you might not get it completely right, but knowing how to build a fire and cook on a fire during a power outage isn't such a gruesome idea. It's actually pretty fun. At
yeah,
least the kids and I have fun doing it.
yeah. So in your book, you're recommending people read your book, one for the theological perspective, maybe, but then also for some practical ways to deal with the situation that we're in.
Yeah, it's as a preacher and teacher and retreat leader, very, very practical in my approach to pretty much everything. Yes, there's a lot of theology in there. The conclusion, God is just love, is grounded in my experience in the writing of the Christian mystics and great theologians, past and present, Teilhard de Chardin, and Richard Rohr in the contemporary world, Brian McLaren and other writers that many in the audience will be familiar with. So it's grounded in a lot of academic information. I haven't been sitting around doing nothing for 75 years. I've learned a lot. However, it's possible to know a lot and not know how to impart that and how to live it yourself. How do you live in such a way that you not only say, but demonstrate to everybody around you that God is just love? Well, one of the ways I do it is in the community I live in and everywhere I encounter folk. I truly believe that everybody in the world is in need of God's mercy, my acceptance, my love, and they don't have to agree with me on very much in order to receive that love. So my wife and I do a lot of cooking and baking bread and such, and just randomly go around sometimes doing that random act of kindness, and try to be the love. And I try to translate that all the time. When you come to the end of the reading on Communion Sundays, you say something about, and actually I can't remember the words right now, it just slipped my mind, but I always say, you become the love of God until Jesus comes again. You act that out in the world, and it's really easy. I mean, once you set your mind to it, the opportunities pop right in front of your face. And if you take some quiet time every day and say, God, what do you want me to be paying attention to? And wow, he just pops an answer into your head. But you have to take quiet time to stop and listen and pay attention to what the trees and the flowers and the forest and the deer and all of that are saying to you. And then make sure you prioritize your life, so that you have time to be that love in very simple ways.
I guess a good sermon is that way. It kind of helps us theologically, and then it leads us into action. And it seems like you're living a life of the pastor, retired pastor, living every day is a sermon, in which you're listening.
Yeah, and we try to, our property where we
acting.
live here in Hideaway Hills in the forest, we are striving with all might and main to have every aspect of our living and our environment and our home be a parable about God's love and the value of preparing. For instance, yesterday, Kathy and I finished building and planting a pollinator garden that gives a home for hummingbirds and bees and butterflies. And we built a bench into this scene, and we're just looking forward in the summer to sitting there and watching it all happen. And other people can come, and when they sit on that bench with us, we can talk about how critical it is to protect the life of bees, for example. We have done projects with our children, teaching them about monarch butterflies. We've actually raised them and set them loose with the grandchildren, and they love those kind of projects. And we've also just finished, and there are a lot of other particular projects around that people can see, like our 2 rainwater collection tanks that we now use to water the garden. Because the book says that the plants in the pollinator garden prefer rainwater. I don't know the science of that, but we also just finished building an summer outdoor kitchen with a wood-fired cooking stove. And we're going to learn and teach others how to cook on an old-fashioned antique stove. And it's connected to an area in the downstairs floor of our house is set up as an emergency shelter. And now we actually have a place for people to cook their meals if they're emergency sheltered. Who knows how this is going to play out. We're just being prepared for some of the more likely ways that we could be the hand, heart, feet of Jesus in the world.
Yeah, so you're preparing, and I think our county has a emergency preparedness, I forget what they call it, task force.
Oh
Because
yeah,
the
they're in all the
increasing number of
communities.
storms, it's happening. I never
Right.
had to worry about tornadoes in Ohio, but there've been several times in the last few years where they
They've
were
been
coming
close
our way and
to
they
your home.
shifted and we didn't get hit, but Dayton, not too far away, some serious devastation. So I like that you're encouraging people to be resilient and to prepare. And yeah, that's wonderful. And you're using your house as an
Yeah.
example. And you're also
We
living.
do now have an emergency preparedness team. It just began about 6 months ago. And at our most recent gathering, we were talking about creating a tornado siren in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
That could be used to provide warning for other kinds of disasters like fire. It's people are too busy.
Yeah.
Or too, I don't know, whatever, driven, and don't realize how important it is. As simple a thing as putting a battery in your smoke detector, for heaven's sakes, and changing them periodically. But you have to know that it's important, and then set time aside to do something in response to the Boy Scout motto: "Be prepared." Why not? It's a good idea.
So the changes that you're hoping to see, I guess you kind of talked about that already, would be that people would have a deep sense of God's love being at the center of everything, that they would model that love, and that they would prepare for the future and
Yeah.
teach
Well, let me
children.
put it in a triad, a trinity
Mhm.
of ways that we need to be developing our lives. We need to become resilient, which is spiritually resilient and emotionally resilient. We need to mature emotionally and spiritually and keep on maturing. That's number one. Number two is we have to build community. Nobody stands alone. And the more friends you have, the more skills those friends have, the better your sense of cooperation, building that before a catastrophe hits so that you've already have trust among your neighbors. And so community second, and third is adaptive skills to new situations. Uh, how would you get through 2 weeks without electricity? Do you know how to prepare food and have sanitary facilities and have drinking water so that if the power was out for 2 weeks, which it was here a couple of winters ago because of an ice storm, we only had 5 days without electricity. Some of our neighbors went more than 2 weeks before it got turned back on. So, do you know how you would live in that situation? And you know, if you have some food on hand, that's just a good idea. So you can learn all about different ways of being prepared. But again, resilient, connected to community, and adaptive skills. Those are the three areas that are the preparations for living in a changing world.
Well, thank you for sharing what you're working on. I've been so impressed with all the work you've done after you retired. And I think sometimes as people get older, they change less, and they kind of settle
Yeah,
in and life becomes harder. But wow, at 75, you're thriving and still very forward looking and trying to help prepare the children, your grandchildren, for the
yeah.
future.
Well,
So
we've given them a world that is in severe risk
yeah,
of many different kinds of different forms of collapse.
right.
We have unfortunately inherited that world from all the generations that came before us, and we got what we got. It's just the way it is. The world is what we received, And yet there can be changes in the way we live that make it more likely that our children and grandchildren are going to do well, no matter what the circumstances of their world turn out to be.
Well, thank you for sharing that. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Uh, well, yeah, there really is just one thing. Um, we were together in Springfield for 10 years, and um, in my book, I invite people to discern the path that God is leading them on, and I've been watching you do that for not just the 10 years I was your pastor, but for the 8 since then. You are on this journey that began with your own spiritual life, um, and uh, and then turn to writing, and then in terms of this podcast, you are on a path that you've discerned from God's leading, and so I'm very very proud of you. You definitely are where the Spirit wants you to be.
Oh,
So
well,
that's what I wanted to make sure I said sometime today.
I appreciate that. I,
Yeah.
I try very hard every morning. I meditate and I listen to God, and my own writing has come out of that and my work. I just feel like I've been born into such a position of privilege. Um, yeah, I just was, not that I've been a wealthy person, but that I've had everything I need: food, shelter, education. And as a Christian, I just feel my job is to give back, and so trying to find out what is mine to do has been part of my life journey, ever since, I was in college. So I keep
Yeah.
looking for that. It
Yeah.
keeps unfolding, and I see that you do also. So I guess we share that, trying to listen
Yes, we
to
do.
God and listen to the natural world and find what is ours to do. So you're doing a great job. So I encourage you to keep it up. And thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today.
My blessing. I thank you very much, Nancy.
I encourage you to check out Ken's books, Halfway to Heaven and God is Just Love. You can find them on Amazon. And also, Ken invites you to join his Traces of God Ministries group on Facebook. Traces of God Ministries is a spiritual formation ministry that provides spiritual direction, retreats, a quarterly newsletter, and other services to spiritual seekers and communities. They're located in Hocking Hills in Southeast Ohio, and they're focusing primarily on forming support groups and doing online counseling. Connect with Ken through his email at drkenwhitt@gmail.com, and he's available for speaking, teaching, retreats, and more, and all the things that he talked about in this interview.